Hey guys, Preacher 357 here. I'm out here in the shop because I wanted to take a look at this new revolver that I got. I posted a picture of it, I think last week, or it may even been the week before last, and that's the Henry Big Boy 357 here. And I thought we'd take a little bit closer look at it. Actually, I've already done the range review, but I'm going to probably post this one first. So everybody can get a little bit closer look at it, and then you can see me taking it down the range and kind of get my ideas of how I like it as far as shooting goes. But I'm just really curious because this is a new design. Henry has never made a revolver before, and so I would like to know what they did. Did they copy Smith and Wesson? And it kind of looks like a Smith and Wesson in a lot of ways. Kind of looks a little bit like a Colt, maybe in some ways, but I really don't know. Did they copy someone else, or is this an all original design? I really don't know. So I thought I'd strip it down a little bit here. I may not take it completely down, but and take a look at sort of how it works, how it field strips, and compare it to a Smith and Wesson and maybe a Ruger as well, and just get an idea of what Henry has done here. Because I know Henry, with their lever actions, especially their centerfire lever actions, I know were basically just the Marlin design that they have taken and used, which, nothing wrong with that. Marlin's a great gun. I love Marlin. So, but I'm curious. I really don't know anything about this gun, really, about how it works. So I've got to check it out. I mean, there's no way around it. I have to try to figure this thing out. And I figured, why not let you guys watch while I fumble around with this thing. So we'll get over here to the cleaning table, and we'll kind of take this thing apart and compare it to a Smith and to a Ruger and just see how it stacks up, and if the design is the same as one of the others or if it's completely unique. But let's go over here and take a look at it. All right, guys, I've got all three of these revolvers out here now. The Henry Big Boy, I've got a Smith and Wesson Model 10, and a Ruger Security 6. This is Model 10 from the 60s, late 60s. This is from the late 70s. And, of course, this is a brand new Henry Big Boy. So I really want to compare them and see just how they stack up, because they're all roughly the same size. They're all going to be roughly K-frame sort of size, it looks like. Now, comparing the cylinders, though, it does look like the Henry Big Boy is a little bit bigger in the cylinder. Frame doesn't look much different, but the cylinder is larger. Let me compare it with the Ruger here. And it looks like it's even a little larger than the Ruger as well. So this might be more of an L frame almost than a K frame comparison, to use the Smith terminology. But it really feels more like a K frame to me in the hand. Of course, these are square butt target sort of grips here, whereas this is the bird's head grip, which it's interesting. It's neat. I won't get into how it shoots or anything, because you'll see the video on that. Right now, I'm just interested in a comparison between all of these and to see how they work. So I'm going to start out by removing the grips here from all of these. There's a screw on both sides of this one. So, unlike the Ruger, it's not one long screw that goes all the way through. It's a screw that holds the man on both sides. So, those are unscrewed. They just come off, I guess. There they go. And these are the the stocks, the grips that come with it. I mean, just looking at, I made a comment in the range video that you'll see later that I thought these were laminate grips. I'm not 100% sure of that now, because these are not laminates here, and these very well may be solid walnut. I may have misspoke there. Hard to tell. I'm not a wood expert, but they're nice looking grips. We'll just leave it at that. So now we've got all the Revolver grips off. We can kind of see how they stack up here. And you'll have to, I guess, look on this side actually to see, turn it this way, so they're all the same way. And one thing that's obvious here is that the Smith and Wesson has a leaf mainspring, which I like. I think it gives a much better trigger pull. This is what gives the tension to your trigger and to your hammer, and yeah, I think it makes for a really consistent and crisp trigger pull, double action especially. This has a coil mainspring, just like the Ruger does. So in some ways now we see it's more like the Ruger than it is the Smith and Wesson. And it makes sense, considering the way the trigger pull feels on this gun, that it would be a coil mainspring. And it's a very small coil mainspring. I mean, looking at the Ruger here and most of the coil mainsprings on a gun this size, I mean, this coil mainspring here, this about the size of a J-frame Smith and Wesson. I mean, it's tiny, very small mainspring on this gun. But anyway, continuing on, let's see what else we've got here. There is a screw on the back there. I don't know what it does. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I don't know if I'm supposed to or not. I think the manual says not to do it, not to strip it down at all, basically, other than just the basics for cleaning. But you know, that's not who I am. I tend to like to do things I ain't supposed to do, I think. I'm a rebel. Though not like as bad as I was when I was a kid. I'm much more well behaved now. So I pull that off and it just attaches to the back of the frame here. So this bottom grip and trigger frame here is separate, and you can see that's even under here. All this brass is a separate piece, obviously. Of course, it would have to be brass instead of steel. But in some ways, it looks like it might actually be somewhat modular, sort of like the Rugers are, because the whole trigger pack on this will pull out of a Ruger. Even the modern ones, this is an older one, obviously. The frames on the grips are different now than they were on this one, but otherwise they're the same. This whole trigger pack pulls out here. There's no lock work in the side. There's a side plate on this Smith and Wesson here, and underneath this side plate is a lot of lock work, a lot of intricate lock work that makes the gun function. The Ruger really has none of that. It's all contained in this little trigger pack down here, and then you just have the hammer and the hammer spring, and there's no lock work in the side, which is why these are considered pretty strong guns. They're rigid frames, I guess is the better way to put it. It's not that the cylinders are stronger, because they're not. A lot of people think Rugers can just handle anything you throw at them because the guns are so strong, and the fact is the cylinders are not stronger than a Smith and Wesson, but the frames are more rigid because they don't have a side plate. So they're able to withstand the twisting forces that can cause what they refer to as frame stretching in a firearm with a side plate like a Smith and Wesson. However, the Henry here looks like it's got a side plate. Looks like it's got a side plate here, and it does have a side plate. This screw right here actually is for the hammer as well. It holds the hammer in place. I did take this apart before the video one time to try to make sure I had some idea of how it came apart. And I took all of these screws out, took all of this apart, and I can't get the side plate off. I'm completely unable to get the side plate off, even with all the screws out. I've tried all the tricks I use on Smith and Wessons and everything else, and it just doesn't come apart. And I don't really understand why. But, and the other thing was these screws were so incredibly tight in this gun. My gunsmithing screwdriver that fit these screws perfectly, I actually snapped the tip off of it trying to take this off. And so the screws, I actually made a little bit of a mess out of them, but I wanted to get them off to try to see, how everything worked together in there, and I just wasn't able to do it. But anyway, I'm going to take this screw out. Well, not yet. I need to remove the mainspring first. So just like with a Ruger, what you do, cock your hammer there. I've got a little Allen wrench here. There's a little bitty hole right here at the bottom that you can stick something through like an Allen wrench here. And now when you release the hammer, it captures the mainspring, and you can see just how unbelievably tiny this thing is. Yeah, I mean, that's minuscule. That's even smaller than a J-frame Smith and Wesson. Not impressive at all, but I guess it works. So now I'm going to remove this middle screw. That's the only one I'm going to remove because it doesn't do any good to remove the other two screws. I still can't get this side plate off. But once I get the hammer out, maybe I can show you down in there what you need to see. Alright, the hammer is out, which looks a lot like a Ruger hammer. That looks a lot like a Ruger hammer. Very similar construction. But if we look down in here, and I may have to just try to take a picture and post it up here because I doubt you're going to be able to see it on the video. But down in here, you'll see there is no lockwork. This side plate hides nothing. If I pull the side plate off this Smith and Wesson here, there's all kinds of little intricate gears and levers and what have you in there that work together. There's nothing down in here. If I pull this side plate off, there's nothing in there. The only reason I can think they may have a side plate is so you can get to this trigger pack here. But, it's kind of strange to even have a side plate if there's nothing under it. And so, in some ways they have designed it like a Ruger, but at the same time, one of Ruger's main strengths of not having a side plate and that extra rigidity that it has in the frame, Henry has lost by putting a side plate on it. Even though I can't get it off, it is a little bit loose in there, which means it's not going to provide the stability that a solid frame like this will. So that's, I'm not sure why they would design it this way, but that's what they came up with. Another interesting thing about this is in order to, it's got the Smith and Wesson style sliding cylinder release there, and the cylinder actually rotates counterclockwise, just like a Smith. But in order to take the cylinder off, the yoke, the crane, whatever they call it, different companies have different names for it. It won't just come off like a Smith and Wesson. At this point with a Smith and Wesson, it would just pull out. With a Ruger, you have to take the whole trigger pack off the bottom in order to be able to get the cylinder out of the gun just for cleaning. So this one doesn't just come off. But the interesting thing here is on the very front of the trigger guard here, there's a little lever, a little button that you press in. And you press the button in and it comes out. With the Smith and Wesson, you have a screw on the side. You have a yoke screw right here that holds the cylinder in place. You just take that screw off and it just slides right out. With this, there's a little button you push in instead. So that's pretty cool. I'll give them that one. I like that. So if I'm going to compare it between a Smith and Wesson and a Ruger, they've taken a little bit of Smith and Wesson in design, the cylinder release, but they took a lot of Ruger. There's a lot of Ruger in this design, but it's not a Ruger clone. So they've done their own thing, but it's much more like a Ruger. You can see here there's a transfer bar in here that rises up, and I'll try to get a better look at that because you probably can't see that on the video here. So it's like a Ruger in that it has a transfer bar, whereas a Smith & Wesson has a hammer block. So that's different there. It's more like a Ruger in that regard. But all of it's attached to the trigger mechanism just like a Ruger. So it's much, much more like a Ruger than it is a Smith & Wesson. And being a Smith guy like I am, that's not my favorite thing. I like Smith & Wesson better than Ruger. Now, I like Ruger, but I prefer Smith & Wesson, so I would have much preferred they do something more like this, or Colt even, than the Ruger. But, Rugers are fine firearms, so I'm sure the Henry is a fine firearm as well. I mean, it seems to be well made. It looks like there's I'm not sure exactly what it is, some sort of screw or bolt or something down in there as well that goes into the trigger assembly here, the trigger guard, and all this entire piece here. I think that helps hold it on, because just pulling that one screw off, obviously it doesn't come out. So disassembly of this part here on the bottom, much more difficult than it is with a Ruger. And the Henry manual even says don't do it. So I guess I'm not going to do it. But that's pretty much what I was trying to figure out on it. It is a design all of its own, but it's borrowing fairly heavily from the way Ruger designed theirs. And it's really not like a Smith really at all, or a Colt, either one. And I would prefer they'd done it differently, as I said. And it makes sense after, because like I said, I've already been out on the range with it. The way the trigger feels, a lot of that is much more like a Ruger to me than a Smith & Wesson. But anyway, that's really all I was wanting to do today, is kind of go over that. One thing about it, though, is once you do get the crane and the cylinder off, they just come apart to a certain degree. It's got this large bulb on the end here that it won't come over. But it's more, the crane and the cylinder are more like a Smith & Wesson than they are a Ruger. So there is that, but that's pretty minor. Anyway, guys, that's really all I wanted to show you. So I appreciate you coming out. If you would check out the description in the video here, I've got a link to the TFA, the Tennessee Firearms Association, where you can join up and get in the fight here in the state of Tennessee if you live in this wonderful state like I do. And there's also a link there to the GOA for a discounted membership. You can get on the fight at the national level there. Of course, the GOA works hand in hand with a lot of the state organizations, and in Tennessee, that's no different. They work hand in hand with the TFA because both are no compromise gun rights organizations. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you coming out. God bless you. Y'all take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.